There's a reason why your biggest goals often feel the hardest to start. Whether you're a content creator or an artist or an entrepreneur, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. This thing happens before we start any kind of meaningful work, and in many cases, it convinces us to quit before we even start. Stephen Pressfield calls this invisible pushback resistance. Today, we're breaking down 4 core ideas from the war of art and how they apply to anyone wanting or trying to start something that really matters to them. We'll talk about what resistance actually is, how to move from an amateur mindset to a professional one, and how to create the kind of discipline that makes achieving your biggest goals not only possible, but inevitable. And if you want to go deeper, I've linked a short worksheet in the description to help you apply these ideas immediately. Let's start with the core concept of the book. Resistance. Resistance is the force that shows up every time we try to grow. It appears as self-doubt or perfectionism, procrastination, distraction, overthinking, or the belief that we need just one more day before we start. When I started Perimeter, I experienced a lot of resistance. I was constantly tweaking our pitch decks and endlessly asking for feedback instead of just getting in the ring and pitching investors. I convinced myself that I was being productive, but really, I was stuck in a cycle of resistance. The same thing happened to me with YouTube. I spent years wanting to make videos about what I was reading before I finally got over the sound of my voice and started making them. So if there's something that you really want to do and you're feeling a lot of resistance around it, I have good news and I have bad news. Pressfield says that resistance doesn't go away, but the good news is once we recognize it, it's much easier to create a path that takes us in the direction we want to go. So the goal isn't to completely eliminate resistance, it's to recognize it and keep moving forward anyway. In order to do that, Pressfield mentions the patterns of 2 types of artists. He calls them the amateur and the professional. The amateur is someone who waits to feel ready, whereas the professional just starts. The amateur works when it's convenient and when they feel like it, whereas the professional has a structure to support them. The amateur hesitates out of fear, whereas the professional sees fear as part of the process. That's the shift from amateur to professional. It's choosing to start and be consistent rather than waiting for the perfect moment, which never comes. And that shift is what makes meaningful progress inevitable. One of the key attributes of the professional is viewing fear as a compass. Pressfield writes that the things we fear most, the things that create a ton of resistance, are usually the things that we're meant to do. I used to think that at some point, the fear that I had would just go away. And once it did, then I could start. But here's the thing, the fear doesn't go away. But now I know that fear is evidence that I'm working on something that I care deeply about. I recently learned this again when it comes to writing. I've been slowly working on a book for a long time, but for the first half of my 20s, the story in my head, aka my resistance, said I wasn't old enough or experienced enough to write and publish a book. But now that I'm in my late 20s and have been running my company for almost 7 years, the story in my head just flipped. And now it's trying to stop me for the exact opposite reason. The new story says, now that you have some experience, you have to write something really good. And that story and expectation is different, but it has also felt debilitating. The fact that my brain is now using the exact opposite argument to convince me not to write just makes it clear that this is resistance talking. So now my job is just to label that resistance and show up and do the work. I can do my best, but whether or not people think it's good isn't actually under my control. So now I'm learning to be more like the professional who focuses on what I can control. And knowing that fear will probably always be part of the equation, especially at the beginning, actually makes it easier to accept it and keep moving forward despite the resistance. The final part of the book is very simple. Pressfield basically says that you just gotta do it. Oftentimes the people we admire aren't necessarily more talented or more disciplined, they just built the skill of showing up to their craft every day. Pressfield calls it putting your body in the chair. You basically just sit down and start your work. Even when you don't feel inspired, even when the work feels boring, and especially when you suddenly think of a million things that need to be cleaned. This process of body in chair is how momentum is created. Not from waiting for motivation, but from showing up, taking the next step, and slowly building the identity that says, I'm a professional, and so I do the work, even for 5 minutes. Okay, let me know what you think about this idea and which form of resistance shows up for you the most. But most importantly, what's one small step you can take to overcome resistance and keep going anyway? And if you want to build habits that support high performance, I've linked a free worksheet below to help you identify where resistance is showing up in your life and what to do about it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next Thursday.